Right now, inside your skull, there are around 86 billion neurons firing. They do not touch. They are separate cells flashing on and off in the dark, each one minding its own tiny piece of the world. One little cluster handles the color red, another handles the edge of a shape, another a smell, another the quiet feeling that this particular moment matters. So here is a question I want you to actually sit with, not just nod at. If your brain is billions of separate parts firing separately in the dark, then who is the one experiencing all of it at once as a single seamless you? I was a quantum mechanics researcher, and I want to be honest with you from the very first minute. Physics and neuroscience, it still cannot tell you where that you is. Not we are close, not we are working out the details. I mean, there is a hole at the center of the science, right where your own self is sitting. By the end of this video, I am going to show you exactly where that hole is, why the ordinary picture of the brain cannot fill it, and where the strangest physics we know may be quietly leaking in. And then I am going to tell you very clearly what that could mean for how you live. Scientists have a name for this hole. They call it the binding problem. It goes like this. Vision is over here. Sound is somewhere else. Memory, emotion, the sense of time passing, all handled by different regions on different cells at slightly different moments. And yet you never experience a pile of separate pieces. You experience one unbroken scene, one now, one you looking out. Look at anything in front of you right now. Its shape, its color, its meaning, the memory it stirs, every one of those is computed by a different patch of brain, and none of them arrives at the same instant. Yet you see one thing, whole, immediately. You never once feel the seams. Somehow, billions of separate firings are bound into a single unified experience. Nobody can tell you how. That binding is the thing the science cannot yet explain. And I want you to hold on to that one question because it is going to carry us all the way to the end. How do the many become one? Now, the standard answer, the one most neuroscientists would give you, is that the brain is essentially a computer. Neurons are switches. Thought is computation. Mind is what the machine does. And as far as it goes, that picture is powerful. It explains how signals move, how memories store, how a decision runs from input to output. If you want to know how the brain processes, the computer model earns its keep. But push it toward our one question and it goes quiet, because a computer, no matter how fast, is still just parts, switches flipping switches. You can wire a billion switches together and get behavior. You can get a machine that sorts, senses, and responds. What you do not obviously get from switches alone is someone home, an inner light, the felt experience of being the one it is all happening to. Getting many separate parts to fire and sync does not, by itself, explain why it feels like anything at all. Philosophers call that missing step the hard problem. It is the binding problem's twin, and the computer picture walks right past both. So some physicists asked a different question. What if the brain is not only a classical machine? What if, down at the smallest scale, it is also doing something quantum? Now I have to slow down and be careful, because this is exactly the place where the internet loves to lie to you. So let me be the honest physicist here. Inside every one of your neurons are tiny hollow tubes called microtubules. They are part of the cell's skeleton. The proposal from the physicist Roger Penrose and the anesthesiologist Stuart Hameroff is that these microtubules could support delicate quantum states, and that the collapse of those states is tied to moments of conscious experience. They call it orchestrated objective reduction. I need to say this plainly. That idea is a contested hypothesis. It is not settled science. For years, the standard objection was simple. The brain is warm and wet and noisy, and quantum effects were supposed to fall apart instantly in a place like that. But the objection has been getting weaker, not stronger. Here is one experiment that made people look twice. Researchers gave rats a drug called epothilone B, which makes their microtubules more stable, and the rats then needed more anesthetic to be put under. Steady the microtubules, and consciousness got harder to switch off. That is suggestive. It is a thread worth pulling. It is not a verdict, and I am not going to inflate it into one. But it points gently at the microtubules being involved in consciousness itself, not just in holding the cell up. Think about what anesthesia actually is. It is the one place in medicine where we reach in and switch consciousness off on purpose and then switch it back on. So if a drug that stabilizes these tiny tubes makes consciousness harder to switch off, then those tubes are sitting a lot closer to the on-off switch of the self than the plain computer picture ever expected. And alongside it, labs have started reporting that quantum effects can survive in warm, living biological tissue longer than the old objection said they ever could. The door that everyone assumed was bolted shut has quietly started to open. Then, in an Oxford journal called Neuroscience of Consciousness, a paper took the boldest swing of all. The paper argues that a quantum process running through those microtubules could be the physical substrate of consciousness, and it claims in its own words that this framework solves the binding problem and something called the epiphenomenalism problem, which is the puzzle of why consciousness should have any real effect at all rather than being a useless sideshow. I want to be exact about who is saying that. That is the paper's claim, not mine. I am reporting it to you, not endorsing it. But notice what it means if it is even partly right. It would mean the many become one not by computation, but by quantum unity. Not billions of parts shouting until they happen to agree, but a single quantum state that is already whole, already one, underneath the billions of cells. And that reframes our entire question. Maybe consciousness was never assembled out of parts in the first place. Maybe it was one thing all along. Because there is a word in physics for separate things sharing a single unified state that cannot be split into independent pieces. That word is entanglement. And the natural next question is almost too bold to ask out loud. Is there any entanglement in a living human brain? In 2022, a team led by Dr. Christian Kerskens in Dublin went looking. And what they found is worth stating carefully. Using a clever twist on brain scanning, they detected signals that, on their best reading, should only appear if something in the brain was entangled in a way that ordinary classical physics does not allow. And those signals rose and fell in step with heartbeat and with conscious awareness. When the effect was strongest, it lined up with short-term memory and with being awake, which sounds like a headline. So let me be the honest physicist again. Harder this time. Is any of this proven? No. The Dublin result is a single indirect finding. The signals could have another explanation, and the authors themselves say it plainly. This awaits independent replication. Until other labs with other equipment see the same thing, it is a fascinating clue and nothing more. Anyone who tells you scientists have proven your brain is a quantum computer is selling you something. I am not going to. So let me lay the pieces on the table cleanly. 1. There is a real unsolved binding problem. 2. The computer model does not solve it. 3. A contested but rising set of results hints that quantum processes, maybe even entanglement, are at work inside the brain. That is the honest edge of the science. And now I'm going to step past it, and I'm going to tell you clearly that I am stepping past it. From here on, this is my model. Here is the turn. We have been assuming consciousness is something the brain produces, the way a fire produces heat, locked inside the skull generated by the meat. But entanglement by its nature does not respect that kind of boundary. An entangled state is not stored at one point. It is shared across places, with no signal traveling between them. So in my model, consciousness is not a thing your brain makes and keeps inside. It is a web of correlation, and your brain is where that web is densest, not where it ends. The you that the binding problem was hunting for is not a spark trapped behind your eyes. It is a pattern of connection that includes the brain and reaches past it into the space around you. Picture it, a single mind glowing, and the threads of it running outward past the edge of the skull into everything. And this is the line I have been building the whole video toward. You are not a small separate thing peering out at a huge and separate world. In this model, you are the field. The awareness and the world are woven from the same connected fabric. Feel what that does to the ordinary story of your life. You have been told you are in here, and everything you long for is out there across a gap to be chased and captured. But if the deepest layer of you is a field of correlation, then the gap was never as solid as it felt. You and what matters to you were, at that layer, never fully separate. That is why the people who feel most alive so often describe the same thing in different words. Connected. Part of it. No longer standing outside their own life, pressing their face to the glass. It is also why loneliness can feel so total and so wrong at the same time. The ache of being cut off from everything is real. But if this model is even pointing in the right direction, that separateness is the surface story, not the deepest one. Underneath it, the thread was never actually cut. And here is the part that actually changes a day. If you are the field, then the basic mistake is to live as an observer, to stand back, watch your life happen to you, and wait to see what you get. Because in every version of the physics we have touched today, observation is never neutral. The observer is always inside the system, part of what unfolds, never a spectator behind glass. The universe does not seem to have any true bystanders in it, so the practice is simple, and it is not a trick to force outcomes. It is to stop living as the observer of your life and start living as a participant in it. Concretely, pick one moment today where you would normally hang back, judge, and wait. A conversation you would watch from the edge of, a room you would stand at the side of, and instead, step in. Speak, act as though you are part of what happens next. Because in this model you always were. Picture yourself stepping forward out of the shadowed edge of the room into the warm light, part of the scene instead of watching it. You are not trying to reach across the gap by force. You are noticing there was less of a gap than you were taught, and then living from that. And picture how that feels. Sitting in calm gold light, the threads around you no longer straining outward, just resting, connected softly to everything in the dark around you. Notice I am not asking you to believe anything the science has not shown. You can hold every hypothesis in this video loosely, as a maybe, and the practice still stands on its own. Living as a participant instead of a spectator makes a life better, whether or not the quantum story turns out to be true. The physics is the reason I find it beautiful. It is not the reason it works. So let me leave you with the line I want you to carry out of here. I am not a passenger inside my head. I am a part of everything I am aware of, and I get to participate in it. Say it slowly and mean it. I am not a passenger inside my head. I am a part of everything I am aware of, and I get to participate in it. If that reached something in you, write it in the comments, in your own words. Something happens when a lot of people hold the same line at once. And one last thread, because it opens straight into where we go next. I told you today that the science is only hinting at quantum effects in the brain, but there is one specific study I did not fully open. Next time, I want to show you the experiment where scientists say they found quantum entanglement inside the living human brain and what it might mean if they are right. I will see you there.